if you were a coalition of extraterrestrial civilizations, and this is what I believe we're dealing with, not one, but perhaps hundreds of civilizations that are aware of our level of development, and you were to see what's happened in the last 100 years, you'd have to be galactically brain dead not to be concerned about where that's headed. We have no small number, I mean dozens of military witnesses to these extraterrestrial vehicles being around intercontinental ballistic missile facilities, nuclear weapons labs, nuclear weapons processing facilities, nuclear battleships, nuclear submarines under the ocean, where they have shown a clear concern for that. And I think that they're wise enough to be able to stand back and see what happens to civilizations that have their technological, or at least the coarser aspects of technology, such as splitting the atom or a nuclear bomb, get ahead of their social and spiritual integration.
Los Angeles, California, home to over 4 million people, a thriving economy, and is one of hundreds of UFO hotspots across the planet. Testimonies from the community, pilots, both military and civilian, law enforcement, and even from some government officials is evidence that the area is alive with extraterrestrial activity. But none would hold as much credibility as the mass sighting on the late evening of February 25th in 1942, where a large craft was spotted by thousands coming over the Santa Monica Bay.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific Wartime this morning. The anti-aircraft guns began barking during a blackout ordered by the 4th Interceptor Command at 2:25 a.m.
In 1942, just weeks after the war began, a strange craft floated over Santa Monica Bay. A strange craft floated over Santa Monica Bay, heading north. Residents in Redondo Beach came out of their homes to see this because of all the air raid sirens that were going off. The United States military fired at the craft. Searchlights were poking through the night sky to try and capture this thing. Thousands of rounds of artillery shells were fired because nobody knew what it was. The obvious thought was this was a Japanese bomber coming over to bomb the United States. It was right into the Second World War. Pearl Harbor had already been bombed. We declare war on Japan, but it wasn't a Japanese bomber. It was flying too high. And the astounding thing was not one artillery shell could hit it of all the thousands of shells that were fired. People outside that night swore that it was not a plane, that it was a flying saucer, a UFO.
On December 26th in 1980, strange lights were reported over RAF Woodbridge and Bentwaters, the now formerly Royal Air Force stations in Suffolk, England, which at the time was being used by the United States Air Force. Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt took a team to investigate the suspected landing site after the first responders made claims of a landed vehicle in Rendlesham Forest.
Now, I never saw personally a mechanical ship or some clearly defined shape. What I saw were lights. I saw three different things. I saw a glowing red eye-like ball that was dripping like molten metal that came toward us, that moved, it came into the forest, moved through the trees, missing the trees, obviously under control. The item moved back into the field and exploded and was gone. There were three objects to the north in the sky that had multicolored lights that moved in synchronization as though they were doing a grid search. We watched them for quite a while and we saw two objects to the south. They were white, bright lights. We couldn't discern a shape. There was a shape, but I couldn't tell what it was. One came overhead at high speed, very high speed, 2,000 or 3,000 feet up, and sent down a laser-like beam at our feet. Just click, it was on. I stood there in awe, very concerned. Is it a weapon? Is it a warning? Is it communication? And as suddenly as it appeared, it disappeared. The object then moved back to the south. The sister object to the south came over Bentwater's base and sent down similar beams in or near the weapons storage area. I can't say they went in. A lot of people didn't say much and kept their mouths shut for years till they retired. I've had a lot of statements now. I have confirmation from the air traffic control people, and I am going to read it a little later tonight. They saw the object go across their scope, 60-mile scope, in 2 or 3 seconds, thousands of miles an hour. He came back across their scope again, stopped near the water tower, which wasn't far from them. They observed it. They watched it go over and go into the forest where we were. Watersham radar, Eastern radar we called it, definitely picked something up, and it was, how should I say, it disappeared, so to speak, the recording and all. But one of the operators has confirmed that they did pick up a bogey, they called it, and it went into the forest, or they lost it near Rendlesham Forest.
You're getting readings on the tree you're taking samples from on the side facing the suspected landing site. 4 clicks max. Up to 4. Interesting. That's right where you're taking the sample now. 4. That's the strongest point on the tree? Yes, sir. If you come to the back, there's no clicks whatsoever. No clicks at all on the back. It's all on the side facing the... Interesting. The indentations look like something twisted as it got, as it sat down on them. Looks like someone took something and sat it down and twisted it from side to side. Very strange. Well, that's the same tree we took the sample off with this, what do you call it, star scope? Star. You're getting a definite heat reflection off the tree, about 3 to 4 feet off the ground? Yes, where the spot is. Same place where the spot is. We're getting a heat. Spot on the tree directly behind us. I picked up the same thing, and one off to your right. 3 trees in the area, immediately adjacent to the site, within 10 feet of the suspected landing site. We're picking up heat reflection off the trees. Yes. You said there's a positive after effect? Yes, there is definitely. That's on the center spot. There is an after effect. What does that mean? When the lights are turned off, once we are focused in and allow time for the eyes to adjust, we are getting an indication of a heat source coming out of that center spot, which will show up on the heat is some form of energy. It's hardly heat at this stage of the game. Looking directly overhead, one can see an opening in the trees plus some freshly broken pine branches on the ground underneath. Looks like someone came off about 15 to 20 feet up. Some small branches about an inch or less in diameter. Zero 148, we're hearing very strange sounds out of the farmers' barnyard animals. It's very, very active, making an awful lot of noise. It wasn't a pigmentation. You just saw a light where? Wait, where? Right in this position here, straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Watch, straight ahead off my flash back there. So there it is. Hey, I see it too. What is it? We don't know, sir. So can I get some of it? Yeah, it's a strange, small red light. Looks to be out maybe a quarter to half mile, maybe further out. I'm going to switch off. The light is gone now. It was approximately 120 degrees from the site. Is it back again? Yes, sir.
Before Colonel Charles Halt had arrived to the scene, the first responders were Jim Peniston and John Burroughs, and they claimed they actually saw the landed vehicle in the forest, mentioning its strange symbols they saw along the side, true descriptions of the extraterrestrial craft, and even a peculiar code that embedded in Peniston's mind. And since the 90s, both had been speaking up and about what they saw in 1980, supported by many credible people.
In 1980, I was assigned to the largest tactical fighter wing in the Air Force at the time. I was stationed at RAF Woodbridge, England. I was the senior security officer in charge of that base security. At that time, I held a top secret U.S. and NATO security clearance and was responsible for the protection of the war-making resources for that base. Shortly after midnight on the 26th of December 1980, Staff Sergeant Steffens briefed me that some lights were seen in Rendlesham Forest, just outside the back gate. He informed me that whatever he seen didn't crash. He told me it landed. I discounted that and reported to the control center at the base that we had a possible downed aircraft. I then ordered Airman Kabanzak, A1C Burroughs to respond with me off-site. When we arrived to the suspected crash site, it quickly became apparent that we were not dealing with a plane crash, or for that matter, anything else we've ever responded to. There was a bright light emanating from an object on the forest floor. As we approached it on foot, a silhouetted triangular craft about 9 feet long, 6.5 feet high, came into view. The craft was fully intact and sitting in a small clearing just inside the woods. Nothing in my training prepared me for what I was witnessing. The photographs that we retrieved from the base lab, 2 rolls of 35 millimeter, of course, were apparently overexposed.
Later, Penniston would return home haunted with the visions of numbers he did not understand. It wasn't until the later years when he showed Burroughs that they found that it was actually binary. So they sought help from a programmer who was able to decode the message, and in what the programmer believed to be a mistake, he decoded it over and over again, shocked that it in fact did tell a message, an incredible 16 or so pages of code that left an eerie message. Exploration of humanity, continuous for Planetary advance, followed by coordinates to very specific and in the UFO culture significant locations, ending with Eyes of Your Eyes, origin year 8100. Popular theory is in fact that these visitors could have been humans from the future, and if that's the case, what do they want? And if it's not humankind, then who would leave such a cryptic message?
It was like it was a pictorial that was running a movie in my brain. You know, it was in a mind's eye kind of thing, and it was flashings of zeros and ones, and later we find out it's some type of binary code, which be honest with you, I have trouble with algebra, or I'm not a math person by no means, let alone computers. I did record the glyphs at the scene, but when I went home in the following day, I don't know, I can't get these images. I mean, they're just like there, 1 0 0 0 0. They're all in my head. So I felt compelled to write them down. So I grabbed my notebook, flipped it open, and then I did the most crazy thing I thought in the world. I wrote these 1s and 0s all the way down. It's like 12, 14 pages of them. I did not tell anybody that happened.
In movies across the world, aliens have been depicted as evil, or perhaps with an evil agenda. And not even remotely is that a far-fetched thing to believe. The debate that they would be beyond resources is highly accepted, but it's more likely that they depleted the resources of their homeworld, solar system, or perhaps even their galaxy. And an aggressor that has the ability to pluck their ecosystem clean is indeed a dangerous force. Even with the incredible leaps in technology we've been able to reach, the almost incomprehensible energy of these visitors would be thousands, if not millions of years ahead of us. Especially to think that these could be the same visitors that helped us accomplish all these technological milestones in the first place.
Now, if there is a life form out there, they could be literally millions of years ahead of us. The universe is 13.7 billion years old, so 1,000,000 years is nothing compared to the age of the universe. And for the most part, I think they're going to be friendly. But if they are hostile, it would be like Bambi meeting Godzilla if we ever had to fight them.
Why? Why do you say that?
Well, realize that if they're that advanced, they can reach the Earth from a distant star. They are already thousands of years ahead of us in technology. And we would present no military challenge to such an advanced civilization. When President Ronald Reagan met Mikhail Gorbachev, Gorbachev was shocked out of his mind that Ronald Reagan said to him, you know, if the Martians ever invade the Earth, you and me would be allies in the fight against the Martians.
With only the little bit of training that could be provided, and with the little gear that is left, the armies of the world begin to prepare for one last defense. The brave civilians that stand to fight will one last time hold their loved ones, one last time look upon each other before things change forever. Their heads held high, they embark on the greatest piece of history in the world, the defense of our home, the defense of our planet. But defense, war, pride, and the want to become more, become better, is embedded in the human DNA. So when communications are cut thin, resources depleting, and our most advanced equipment proving to not be enough, what is left for us to do? What do you do when your airspace is controlled so viciously? A boots-on-the-ground strike is the only chance for survival. Techniques not relying on technology. Find the resources they are after and trap it. Explosions from within their collection ships could chain react and destroy the ship, but how long would that work? And with little ammunition left, fighting wave after wave of ground troops would prove exhausting and ineffective. But still we fight. And if we survive, we will learn, grow, and adapt. Public records show no vehicle under our control or control of any nation in the world has even the remote ability to fight back. And not only fight back, but win. Dr. Stephen Greer of the Sirius Project says that that is not the case. That we have in fact been in possession of this type of equipment for years, with billions of dollars being funneled into special access projects that is not relayed to the public. We're more prepared than you think.
There was a memo from a comment, I should say, in a speech by then Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, who stated that there is $2.3 trillion unaccounted for in the Department of Defense budget. Let me repeat that number, $2.3 trillion. This was on September 10th, 2001. Now, prior to that, I was not surprised at that comment because back in 1994, I had a meeting with Mr. D'Amato, not the senator, who was the chief counsel for the Senate Appropriations Committee, and he informed me that they felt that there was upwards of or in excess of $100 billion a year missing out of the Treasury going into so-called black projects. Now, this is a misnomer, just so that the committee knows. The proper term in the military and intelligence world is an unacknowledged special access project. Now, special access projects are projects that, of course, you have to be read into with various clearances. The unacknowledged ones are ones for which there is no acknowledgement on paper, and anyone in the project is ordered not to speak about it under threat of termination with extreme prejudice, which is death. My senior military advisor was in one such project. He has not even informed me what it concerned. It was under Admiral Harry Train. It was a $3 billion project. This is one project that was unacknowledged. So this is not a theory. This is how the deep national security state actually operates, that the members of Congress usually are not aware of. Now, in the ensuing years, since 2001, we have continued these briefings. We've had greater success in other countries. There are now more than 14 countries that have opened their UFO files. We've been very instrumental in this. I've worked with people at the Vatican, the French government. And what is also very exciting is that one of the most important documents in history, which I'll provide to the committee, is a document from the Ministry of Defense of France committing to my organization to engage in a long-term project to make peaceful contact with these quote-unquote visitors. I will tell you, however, that as they began to step into this, they were warned off by someone within the national security state saying, do not pursue this. And so we went to France, about 3 years ago, and we had an expedition to actually make contact with these extraterrestrial civilizations. And the Admiral later informed us that their radar tracked objects that came over the site at between 100,000 and 200,000 kilometers an hour. My uncle was a senior project engineer at Grumman that became Northrop Grumman that put the first man on the moon with the lunar module. He worked on the lunar module, which is part of how I got involved with this. What I have found through my uncle and other contacts at Lockheed is that we have had, since about the mid-1950s, operational electromagnetic gravitic devices, basically in parlance of the pop culture anti-gravity devices that are deeply classified and are the next generation beyond rockets and jet aircraft. These are fully operational and not experimental. These have been used very discreetly. We have an enormous amount of information on this, including a facility, Norton Air Force Base, where we had Frank Carlucci, Secretary of Defense for Ronald Reagan, was ushered in there, and some people who were with him, such as Brad Sorensen, have given us information and actually have helped us provide schematics and drawings for these so-called alien reproduction vehicles. A great deal of evidence that suggests that the scientists, including Herman Oberth and Werner von Braun and others, were working on a bell-shaped craft.
Eines Volkes. Jahren geleistet wurde. Bedenken Sie, 6,5 Millionen.
This, some say, was the Wunderwaffe, the wonder weapon. A weapon so powerful, so exotic, that even in the last minutes of the war, as the Soviet army closed in on Poland, could have changed the whole course.